Walter Almeida says EMP, electromagnetic pulse. For those of you who don't know, it's a byproduct of a nuclear explosion. When this goes off, it generates a large electromagnetic pulse, and that this magnetic pulse is large enough and steep enough so that as this magnetic wave propagates itself, if you detonate one in orbit and its significant size, as that expanding sphere of magnetic energy propagates itself downward across the Earth, it doesn't do the slightest bit of damage in terms of there's no heat damage and there's no blast damage. It's outside of the atmosphere. But the magnetic damage, as the magnetic fields hit the wires, electricity is generated by moving a magnetic field down a wire. Basically lassos the electrons and moves them right along. Yep, out the other end it goes. So the magnetic fields drive the free electrons in things like copper downstream, and the faster and more powerful the the magnetic field is, the more electricity you get out of the system. So a generator is simply a spinning series of electromagnets that spin inside of coils of copper wire usually, and then they push the electrons downstream and you have electricity. Well, the problem is that this magnetic pulse from an exploding nuclear device is so large and so crisp, so sharp, that it pushes, the magnetic field pushes all of these electrons down the existing copper wires in regular things like power lines and throughout the circuits on microchips in your car and your phone and transformers and everything. And it basically sets up an enormous burst of electricity in the system that destroys the electronics, just cooks them. Cars won't start because they're all using chips, except pre-85 cars like a Jeep. My friend has a Jeep and she just cranks it, and that'll probably survive, although the solenoids might go too. So the problem with the electromagnetic pulse is, depending on how actually effective it is, I don't think anybody really clearly understands. I'm sure some people do. But what that really means is the United States, like Israel, then becomes a one-bomb country. In other words, if you have one weapon and you have the means to get it, in order for it to be working, it has to be more or less above the horizon, and obviously the more high overhead, the better it is in terms of range. But the higher physically it is away from you, the more the weaker it is because of the inverse square law. So in any event, the theory is that if you could put a nuclear device over the United States and detonate it, you would basically take down the electrical grid, and it wouldn't just be a temporary thing. You would basically cook everything. You, as Iron Ked points out, it's induced current. It induces the current out of the wires, and so everything is gone. And the United States in the flash, literally in a flash. Not a single person's killed, and that's another part of why this is a powerful weapon, you see, because if Iran had detonated a nuclear weapon over New York City and killed 1 million people, that would get a nuclear response even from President Peace Prize. But what happens if you detonate a weapon in space and you destroy the U.S. power grids or significant portions of it, and you don't kill a single person immediately? It's certainly an act of war. There's no question about that. Does it get a nuclear response? I don't know. It would if I was president, but there are parking tickets that would get a nuclear response if I was the president. We have such a smart crowd. Somebody just said, Aaron Manning said optimal detonation 75 to 150 miles above sea level. 75 miles above sea level is not even in orbit. But 150 is. So it's low. But it's in space. Certainly 75 miles is outside of virtually all of the atmosphere by density anyway. So there's your problem. You suddenly go from living in a 21st century world to living into a 17th, 18th century world overnight. And this is news to people, but you can't forget the rest of the world. You can't support 300 million people in this country without tractors and combine harvesters and pumps. You might be able to. I don't know if certainly not. Certainly the world won't. And then even if you could grow enough food, you can't. Obviously, you can't. You just can't. There's no. Not only is there not enough horsepower to till the fields, there's not any equipment to hook the horses up to. There's probably a few farms that can use a horse, but honest to God, these giant farms are done. All the orchards and stuff are done. You can't get the food out even if you had it. You could slaughter all the beef in the country, but you can't deliver the food. You can't refrigerate the food. You suddenly have these population centers with 10 or 15 million people in them. The farms will be fine. The countryside will be okay, as the countryside was in the 1800s, because it was all countryside. There were no cities as we understand them. There were towns and stuff, but they weren't really cities. What do you do in New York? Just think about this. What do you do in New York City if the electricity goes out and you can't use an elevator? What do you do if you live on the 60th floor, 70th floor of one of these apartment buildings, just in the interim? And the tragic part about the EMP is the interim is not going to be a week or a month without electricity. You would simply lose the ability to move and power things for years, because, all of our elected officials, but specifically this guy, we're going to spend $800 billion on a stimulus package. You could have stockpiled transformers, and you could have put in circuit breaking measures to protect. It's called hardening. You could harden the electrical grid. You could have done it, but you didn't. So it's going to be, if it happens, it'll be a catastrophe. Catastrophe is not the word for it. It'll be the end of everything that we understand, because it will destroy the U.S. economy overnight, and the destruction of the U.S. economy means the destruction of the world economy. And we will all be third world people together. Income inequality will simply disappear. We'll all be living in the mud together. So it'd be nice if that didn't happen. Now, I don't know what the power of the EMP is. I do know that there were large numbers of above-ground nuclear tests, 100 at least, in Las Vegas, and didn't seem to have much effect. People used to come out of the casinos to watch them. Now, these were most of these weapons were extremely low yield, but I do know, and I've seen the video of it. By the way, if you can find it on YouTube, look up the video for nuclear detonation in space. It is simply the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's like a giant flower. It looks nothing like the in atmosphere mushroom cloud. It's a blue veined spectacular spiderwebby thing. It's like somebody cracked a blue marble. Really beautiful to see. That's a nuclear explosion in space. I think it's on YouTube. You can find it if you look. But EMP is the end of the world as we know it. Up against this horror and all of this thing, you do find out that when the NSA and people like that are doing the job that they were supposed to be doing, which is protecting us from the bad guys who don't live in the country or who live outside the country. And by the way, I don't even have a problem with the NSA spying on bad guys in the country. I just don't want them spying on the good guys in order to catch the bad guys. That's the fundamental difference to me. But it's become just known to me through just some of the military people I talk with and stuff that we have radiation detection devices of such spectacular subtlety that if a container ship were to round, Cape of Good Hope, 300 miles off the coast, and it was carrying anything the size of a warhead, we would be able to detect it through the container ship, through the container. We have extraordinarily sophisticated devices, and thank God for that. And as always, it's the defense playing the offense, and, as the NSA-type people and the CIA people say, we have to win every time, and they only have to win once. And that's it. Aaron Manning, who seems to certainly know what he's talking about, said Central Pacific atmospheric detonations knocked out power in Chile several times. So I'm sure if you were to specifically detonate the correct yield, and I'm sure the type of warhead is very important. I'm certain that you can create a warhead that is a high EMP yield warhead in the same way you can create a neutron bomb. It's a high neutron yield weapon. So there you go. And I think Karsten Mueller 16 here said it's Operation Dominique. It's the nuclear explosion in space. So if you want to search for Operation Dominique, that might be cool to see. I loved all those, Abel and Baker and all these different code names they had for those weapons tests. They're really kind of interesting. The last thing I'll say about nuclear explosions and nuclear energy and nuclear weapons and all this other stuff is, if there is one thing that is overhyped in this society and over-feared, it's nuclear energy. Now, needless to say, in the same manner that I call for the immediate murder and execution of California people entering Texas, people who are capable of taking that seriously are capable of taking anything else seriously too. I'm not trying to suggest for an instant that if you find yourself underneath a nuclear fireball, it's going to be a good day. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying, however, that when you ask people, I bet if you went out on the street and said, which country in the world has suffered the most nuclear damage, they would, to a man, would say Japan, if they knew it all. Japan. Yeah, how many bombs were dropped on Japan? How many nuclear weapons were detonated in the air, in the skies over Japan? 2. You know how many nuclear weapons were detonated in the skies over the United States? It's 100. 100 nuclear weapons. 101 if you count Trinity, and I do. 101 nuclear explosions in the air and on the ground in the United States, on U.S. territory, almost exclusively in Nevada. Over 100. And there's another 900 that went down underground. If you take a look at the fatal blast radius for the Hiroshima bomb, and there's a couple of map apps that allow you to do this. They'll allow you to pick a Google map area, just put your dot anywhere you want, and then calculate the various rings of destruction based on the size of the yield of the weapon. If you put the Hiroshima bomb at the control tower at LAX airport, the fatal blast radius does not leave the airport boundary. In other words, that bomb is relatively speaking so small that if you detonated it in the center of LAX, the fatal blast area stays within the airport boundaries. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki were rice paper structures. They were literally made out of paper and bamboo. You had a lot of and the density of the people were very, very high. Lots and lots and lots of people living in extremely flimsy structures, very closely packed together. And I'm not trying to say that an atomic bomb is a fun thing at all, but I am saying that when people think about a nuclear weapon detonating over Los Angeles, even if it's an H-bomb, they think the whole city's just scoured off the face of the earth. It just didn't happen that way. It just doesn't. So it's important, I think, that just people... I just want people to be informed, right? I just want people to have some fundamental understanding of what's really going on. When they had the meltdown about the Fukushima reactor, I mean, what happened there? That thing was designed to take a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 9 is inconceivable. Inconceivable. And it was a 9.1. So it exceeded the it wasn't just a once in a century earthquake, it was a once in a millennium earthquake, and it hit. And it turns out that reactor would have been fine. It would have survived the earthquake. It would have survived that magnitude 9 thing just fine. The one thing that they didn't anticipate at Fukushima was that the tsunami would take out the backup diesel cooling devices. That's the one thing they hadn't considered. So they had a backup for the backup. The containment held, and then they were going to use diesel powered pumps to get the water in there to keep the thing cool until the thing could get repaired. They did not count on the fact that the diesel engines would be taken out by the tsunami, by the wave. But the point I'm trying to make here with Fukushima is, to as far as extent of my knowledge, I don't think anybody's died from that reactor. 16,000 people, was it, died in the wave? And all we talk about is the radiation. We don't talk a word about the 16,000 people who were killed by this tsunami blast. We're worried about the people who were sick from radiation from this catastrophe. And by the way, yet again, when you look at, apparently, again, I'm not an expert on this, but just to have kind of cursory layman's knowledge, it looks like what the actions that the company took, that the Japanese government and the electric company took, were actions that were trying to save the reactor, trying to preserve it, in other words. And if they'd simply just flooded it, then we wouldn't even be talking about it. Somebody just pointed out, both Hiroshima and Nagasaki are beautiful, beautiful rebuilt cities, and they didn't have to wait through 70 years of zombies to make it. They just rebuilt it. And now if you combine Hiroshima and Detroit, you tell me which city got nuked. So the point I'm trying to make about Fukushima and about understanding risk so that you can make intelligent decisions is simply this. It was pointed out to me, and I don't doubt this for an instant, that if you were to evacuate a village that was 10 kilometers away from Fukushima, and in order to get them away from the danger of radiation from this plant, you put them on an airplane and flew them to Los Angeles, they'd take more radiation on the flight to Los Angeles than they would have taken if they'd stayed there in Fukushima. Because you get a pretty good radiation dose when you spend an hour or two in the stratosphere, and if you spend 12 hours in the stratosphere, you get a better one, and if you spend 18, you get even more. So this is all I'm saying. This idea that detectable amounts of radiation, we can detect the amount of energy is being distributed from the Voyager probe, and it's in interstellar space. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. We have the kind of sensitivity where it's detectable amounts of radiation. It's like, what does that mean? You know, if you were to walk through Grand Central Station in New York City, and millions of people do every week. I don't know how many do a day. Probably millions. Hundreds of thousands without question. Walk through Grand Central Station every day. The radiation levels inside of Grand Central Station are well in excess of what would ever be tolerated on the control room of a nuclear reactor. Far, far higher than those in the control room of a nuclear reactor. And the reason is because there's so much granite in Grand Central Station, and granite contains a fair amount of uranium, just basically radiates radiation. And the point of this is that your body is designed to absorb and take a significant lots of radiation. And if we weren't able to deal with radiation, we all would have been dead a long, long time ago. Our bodies, other animals' bodies, deal with damage done by radiation. The ground is radioactive. There's cosmic rays coming down from the sky. Bananas have so much potassium in them that they're radioactive too. Nobody ever is like screaming and yelling and grabbing bananas out of kids' hands, but they will in California, especially. You just wait and see. When people understand in the future that bananas are radioactive, and when somebody decides to make an issue out of it, when some legislator gets his hand on it, they're going to start banning bananas because they're radioactive, and people are going to have hysteria, fits, just fits. Because people are frightened of things because there is no press. There's nobody to tell them what the risk is. There's no one to tell them that the radiation levels in Fukushima are lower than they would be if we evacuated the entire town in a jet airplane to LA. That's all you need to know. And Dave Olson, our loyal and trustworthy Dave Olson over there, talks about a word that's an interesting word called homeosis. And homeosis is the idea that if you give an organism a radiation dose, a low-level radiation dose, constantly, and you just keep upping it, you can, in fact, activate the body's repair mechanisms so that the repair mechanisms are now working at an enhanced rate. And if you do this homeosis carefully, which is the way you would want to do it, you can actually sort of pre-build up a human body's resistance to radiation to remarkable degree, really remarkable degree, how much radiation you can take, especially once you get those repair mechanisms activated. So that's all I'm saying. I'm saying, I want to be afraid of the things that are worth being afraid of. And if it turns out that cows kill more people than sharks by an order of 10, or whatever the number is, that's important to me. That's how I'm going to make my risk evaluations. No more surfing in the cow patties for me. Those days are done. I'm just not going to take that kind of risk. So anyway, let's see. I got a couple more, and we're